A free market economy is one of those phrases we hear a lot from politicians on the right, and it's had a massive impact on how we live today. But what is it and how did it come about? Well, you have to go back to the 1950s and a guy called Milton Friedman in America who proposed a theory that there should be little, if any, government intervention in society and that privatisation and market forces would be the best way to run everything. So, how does it affect us today? Well, it's taken up by the likes of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in the 80s, and a perfect example is the selling off of council housing, which should have been replaced but wasn't. And that's why we've got a huge shortage of housing with runaway prices if you want to buy today, and unaffordable rents due to the pressures of demand. We've also got 4 in 10 of those houses now owned by private landlords. So I guess if you agree with the free market ideology, you'd probably class it as a success. Now, we've had trade since way back in history when some bloke said to his neighbour, "Oi, mate, my sheep's worth 3 of your chickens," and a deal was done. But the free market theory falls down when you talk about services like rail, water, and health, which by their nature will only work for the majority of citizens as services, not as profit making schemes. In fact, the whole free market theory fell apart in the banking crisis of 2008, when instead of letting failed banks go under like any other business would have done, the government bailed them out to the tune of £124 billion. Our total liabilities came to 1.2 trillion, and we haven't been paid back yet, even though the banks, their shareholders and directors are again raking it in. Instead of rewarding directors, we should have been putting them in prison. Looking at rail, we've got a ridiculous situation where the government subsidises private rail companies with about £5 billion a year, while they continue to pay shareholder dividends. Our tax money literally goes directly into their pockets, and there's no incentive for them to provide a decent service. If privatisation doesn't work, which it obviously doesn't on that, change the system. It's the same with water, where private companies have been allowed to skim off the profits personally while allowing our rivers and seas to become more and more polluted. We're even paying out 1.6 billion to help them clean up their act. And we're seeing the same happen with the NHS, where the lack of government investment has brought the service to its knees, and they'll come up with a brilliant idea that the private sector will be its saviour, with the government stepping in, of course, to protect the private companies when it all goes tits up. So, what's the answer with these essential services needing massive investment from whichever flavour of government we get next? I'm suggesting a not for profit model where you don't have shareholders, but any profit is put back into the business. It will be a hard sell with all the shareholders screaming that they won't get compensation. But you know what? Shares are a gamble, and sometimes you lose.